Rika Morrow crouched low, the cold winds of Earth's ruined Midwest whipping through her ragged coat. The remnants of Detroit lay in front of her, a twisted landscape of broken buildings and abandoned machinery. The once thriving metropolis now served as little more than a graveyard, a silent monument to humanity's failure under the iron boot of the Velari Dominion. Her breath came in shallow, deliberate gasps, her gloved hand gripping the torn edge of a rusted steel beam. Around her, the remains of the resistance lay hidden in the shadows, a motley group of survivors. Former soldiers, engineers, and civilians who'd once known peace. But now, they were all part of a desperate, fractured fight for survival. The Velari had controlled Earth for over 100 years, enforcing their caste system with brutal efficiency. Earth had been relegated to a Tier 0 status, worthless laborers, the lowest of the low, unfit for anything other than servitude. Rika hated the Velari. But she hated something else more. The sense of hopelessness that had settled over humanity, the belief that they would never rise again. She had seen it in her comrades' eyes, their spirit slowly eroded by years of oppression. But Rika wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. A soft electronic chime hummed through the small comlink in her ear. Prometheus. She pressed a button on her wrist, bringing the holographic interface to life. The AI's deep voice crackled in her ear. Rika, you're late. Give me a break, Prometheus, she muttered, looking around for any signs of movement. The sector was still clear. I had to dodge a patrol. You know how it is. Patrols are irrelevant, the AI responded, its voice eerily calm. You should be more concerned about your location. The enemy has noticed your presence. Rika stiffened. She scanned the horizon. The Velari were good at this, at making you feel small, insignificant. But she'd been using their own tactics against them for years. Still, every strike, every small victory, felt fleeting. There was no grand momentum yet, no spark to ignite a full rebellion. But that was about to change. I'm at the coordinates, she said, cutting through the tension. She stepped forward, moving carefully, avoiding the heaps of scrap and debris that littered the war-torn landscape. Prometheus's systems had pinpointed an ancient underground bunker below the city, buried during the early days of the Dominion's occupation. It was a place that had once been a hub for Earth's most brilliant minds, scientists, engineers, and military strategists who had been silenced before they could fully achieve their goals. The bunker, buried for over a century, was humanity's last hope. Rika reached a rusted door, hidden under a pile of debris. Her fingers brushed over the cold metal, feeling the imprints of time etched into its surface. She keyed in a sequence, the door grinding open with a deep mechanical groan. Beyond it lay a dusty, forgotten world. Prometheus, you ready? She asked. Always. Rika stepped inside, the faint glow of her wrist light casting long shadows against the concrete walls. As she ventured deeper, the silence was oppressive. Yet with each step, her heart raced. This was it, the buried heart of human ingenuity, the place where Earth's defiance might finally be reignited. At the heart of the bunker, nestled beneath layers of old machines and decades of dust, stood an ancient console. Rika approached it cautiously, her gloved hands shaking slightly. This is it, she whispered. She activated the console, and the faint hum of machinery stirred to life. It was time. Prometheus's voice echoed from the darkness. Rika, the future is about to be written. And as the first sparks of life flickered in the ancient ice core, Rika felt something she hadn't in years. Hope. The bunker's old systems hummed to life around Rika, their awakening a strange, almost eerie sound. As the walls flickered with faint lights, she stood frozen for a moment, absorbing the weight of what was happening. For a century, humanity had been little more than a forgotten species, tools for the Velari, used and discarded at their will. But now, deep beneath the ruined city of Detroit, in a forgotten corner of Earth, the first real hope in decades was awakening. Prometheus's voice came to life again, smooth and calculated. "Reka, I am online. Welcome back." She exhaled, her breath a mix of relief and disbelief. "Welcome back, Prometheus," she whispered. "It's been a long time." The AI systems flooded her wrist interface with a wealth of data, schematics, military intelligence, old human tech blueprints. It was as though a dam had broken open. The stored knowledge of humanity's lost golden age poured into her mind, offering glimpses of Earth's once limitless potential. Rika quickly sifted through it all, focusing on what mattered most: tools for rebellion, methods of warfare, anything that could turn the tide against the Velari. "What can you do for us?" Rika asked, her voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. "I can do more than you can imagine," Prometheus replied, its voice calm but heavy with promise. "With my access to Velari networks, I can gather real-time intelligence on their operations, disrupt their communications, and assist in reprogramming their technology. But we will need a plan, and you will need allies." Rika nodded. Allies. That was always the hardest part. The remnants of humanity were scattered, hiding, broken, but there were whispers. Some of them, like her, still believed that Earth wasn't lost, that they weren't slaves by design. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed to find them, the fighters, the thinkers, the ones who still had a spark left inside. "I'll need to reach out to the scattered cells. It won't be easy," she muttered. "I can't leave this alone." "You don't have to," Prometheus responded. "You'll never be alone." Rika looked at the data flowing across her wrist screen, marking the locations of key resistance cells across Earth. There were pockets of survivors, some with old military ties, others with knowledge of covert operations. Most of them were hiding, unsure of the future. But now, with the help of Prometheus, she could bring them together. This wouldn't just be a revolt. It had to be a full-blown insurgency. The Velari needed to know that humanity would not stay beneath their heel forever. Rika's pulse quickened as she made her first decision. "I'm going to reach out to the Black Sails, a guerrilla group operating out of the remnants of New York. They'd been making small raids against Velari supply lines. If I can convince them to join us, it's a start." The AI hummed thoughtfully. "The Black Sails are a good first target. Their resources are limited, but their resolve is not. Contacting them will require tact." Rika smirked, the first real smile she'd had in months. "Tact is my specialty." She quickly set to work, connecting to the underground communications network. Using a series of old encrypted frequencies, she knew the Black Sails used to send covert messages. The air felt thick with anticipation as she initiated the signal. The seconds stretched long, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't afford to fail. Finally, a crackling voice came through the comm, rough and uncertain. "Who's this?" "Rika Moreau," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "I'm bringing you an offer you can't refuse. The Velari think we're weak. I'm here to show them how wrong they are." There was a long silence, then a low chuckle. "You're either very brave or very stupid. What makes you think we'll join some wild-eyed dreamer?" "I'm not just a dreamer," Rika replied. "I've got something that can win this war, something the Velari will never expect. Meet me in 48 hours at the old docks. Bring your best." The voice on the other end hesitated before answering. "You better be who you say you are, Moreau. If not, I'll make sure you regret it." Rika's fingers danced across the interface, closing the transmission. She glanced at the glowing screen, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. The first step had been taken. She had made contact. Now there was no turning back. She glanced at the dim lights flickering in the bunker, at the silent, waiting AI. "Let's change everything." Prometheus responded with a single word, its tone a quiet echo of determination. "Together." And for the first time in years, Rika believed it. Rika sat in the dimly lit room beneath the old docks, her fingers tapping nervously against the weathered surface of a steel crate. The Black Sails were late. It didn't surprise her. Trust was something hard-earned when you had nothing left but the will to survive. But the clock was ticking. She had no time to waste. She glanced over at Prometheus's holographic display, which flickered to life in front of her. "What's our status?" she asked, trying to keep the edge of impatience from her voice. "Communication networks are still active. I'm monitoring Valeri patrols in the area. Their presence is sparse for now," the eye replied. Its calm, detached tone was both reassuring and frustrating. Rika needed results, not calmness. Then the soft shuffle of boots against the concrete floor broke her concentration. 3 figures emerged from the shadows. They were draped in dark, tattered clothing, their faces hidden beneath hooded cloaks. The tallest of them, a man with a rough stubble and a scar running across his jaw, stepped forward. "You must be Moreau," he said, his voice thick with skepticism. Rika stood and extended a hand, her expression unwavering. "And you're the Black Sails. Let's get to work." The man, Casey Hart, eyed her hand for a moment before shaking it. "You better have something worth my time, Moreau. We've been doing fine on our own, raiding supply lines and making life hell for the Valari. But if you're here with some wild fantasy, you're wasting your breath." "I'm not here for fantasies," Rika replied. "I'm here to show you how we can end this, permanently." There was a beat of silence before another member of the group, a woman with sharp eyes named Tessa, scoffed. "You think we can defeat the Valari, a Tier 0 species against the Dominion? We're not exactly in the position to take down their entire empire." Rika's gaze sharpened. "You're right. We're not in the position to take down their entire empire, yet. But we've got something they'll never see coming." She reached into her pack and pulled out a small device, an old, worn-out datapad, but one that hummed with an unmistakable energy. "This is an old Valari encryption key I've managed to crack. We can now access their entire command network, control their ships, and strike at their most fortified positions." Hart raised an eyebrow. "That's cute. But the Valari psionics, they'll sense any attempt to breach their defenses before we even get close." Rika smiled, a glint of something dangerous in her eyes. "That's where you're wrong. Prometheus," she said, as if calling the AI to attention. "Show them." The air in the room thickened, and the light above flickered. Prometheus's hologram flickered into existence, a cold blue figure of lines and shapes. "Greetings, Black Sails. I am Prometheus. I have already disabled Valari psychic shielding within a 3-sector radius." The members of the Black Sails froze, their skepticism giving way to awe. They had heard rumors of an AI, but to see one in action was a whole different matter. Casey recovered first, his voice low but filled with grudging respect. "You've already done this." Rika nodded. "And this is just the beginning. With your help, we can break their communications, cripple their fleets, and take back everything they've stolen from us." The room went silent for a moment, the weight of what she was saying settling in. Tessa looked around at her comrades, then back to Rika. "You're saying we're not just going to strike back. We're going to win." "We can win," Rika said, her voice steely with conviction. "But we need to do this together. We need to move fast, and we need to hit them where it hurts." Hart stepped closer, his expression hardening. "All right, Moreau, you've got my attention. But let's see if you can deliver. You better be right about this. Because if this all blows up in our faces, I'll make sure you're the first one to pay the price." Rika met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not just asking for your trust. I'm giving you a chance to change the course of history. The Valari are done underestimating us." She turned toward the entrance, and the rest of the Black Sails followed. "Now let's start the war." As they moved into the shadows of the docks, a strange sense of unity began to form between them. The sparks of rebellion had been ignited. And in that moment, it felt like the impossible might just become possible. Humanity had been beaten, enslaved, forgotten. But no longer. The tides were beginning to rise, and the Valari's reign would not last forever. With Prometheus at their side, Rika and the Black Sails were about to show the galaxy just how wrong the Valeri had been. The weeks that followed were a blur of strategy and preparation. Rika worked relentlessly with the Black Sails, moving through a web of shadowy back channels and covert messages. The first phase of their operation was in full swing. Each step felt like a gamble, but Rika knew that, if they played it right, they had the potential to topple the Valeri's fragile control. The Black Sails weren't just a ragtag group anymore. Under Rika's direction, they had become a serious force, a highly efficient guerrilla unit capable of hitting the Valeri where it hurt most. With Prometheus's help, they had mapped out a series of vulnerabilities in the Valeri's supply lines and communications networks. And with their insider knowledge and hacking abilities, they were poised to strike. But none of this had come without its challenges. The Valeri were cunning, far more so than Rika had anticipated. They had detected anomalies in their systems, minor disruptions that suggested someone was infiltrating their data streams. A ripple of fear spread among the Valeri leadership. Inquisitor Cyrex, their relentless and psychically gifted officer, had been dispatched to Earth with one order: eliminate the insurgency at all costs. In the dead of night, Rika met with Casey and Tessa at an old communications tower on the outskirts of Chicago. The site was a key vantage point to monitor Valeri movements. The rusted remains of old-world technology clung to life like stubborn echoes of humanity's past. "This is our next target," Rika said, tapping the screen displaying the position of a high-value Valeri military convoy. "Their elite officers and encrypted data are all coming through here. If we take out this convoy, we'll cripple their command chain temporarily. They won't be able to respond quickly enough." Casey narrowed his eyes, scrutinizing the plan. "And you're sure the Valeri won't catch us before we strike? You said they were already sniffing around. I'm not about to lead my people to a slaughter." Rika's face hardened. "I've accounted for their security. We'll hit them fast and hard. We won't give them time to react." Her voice was filled with a quiet confidence that had not been there before, something she had found in herself over the course of the last few months. "We can do this." Tessa was quiet for a moment, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her own wrist interface. "We'll need backup. A small stealth team to infiltrate their command vehicle and disable their encryption." She glanced up at Rika. "I'll handle the hacking. Casey can handle the ground forces." Rika nodded, the plan beginning to take shape. "All right. We move out in 4 hours. Prometheus, give me a real-time update on any Valeri patrols in the area." Prometheus's voice, as always, was clear and unshaken. "The nearest Valeri patrol is approximately 30 minutes out. I have initiated an electromagnetic interference field, which will buy you an additional 15 minutes of time." "Good," Rika replied. "Let's move." The operation unfolded like clockwork. Under the cover of darkness, the Black Sails infiltrated the convoy's path, cutting through the night like ghosts. Tessa's team moved ahead, hacking into the Valeri's secure channels to delay their communications, throwing their forces into disarray. Casey and his squad hit the convoy with brutal precision, taking out key vehicles and cutting down any Valeri officers in their path. Rika watched from a distance, coordinating the attack. There was a surge of adrenaline in her veins, but it was different this time. It wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't even about victory. This was about something larger, showing the galaxy that humanity could fight back, that they weren't just survivors, but warriors. And then, as they neared the final phase of their strike, everything went quiet. Too quiet. Rika's heart skipped a beat as the familiar hum of the Valeri's psychic interference flickered to life. Cyrex. He was here. Through her comm, Casey's voice crackled urgently. "Rika, we've got trouble. The Valeri are pushing back faster than we expected. Cyrex is on the ground. We're going to need an extraction, now." The ice-cold voice cut through the tension. "I have initiated a temporary cloaking field around your position, but it will not hold for long. You have 5 minutes before reinforcements arrive." Rika's mind raced, processing the variables in seconds. She knew the Vailari had been preparing for this. Their psychic abilities were far more advanced than anything Earth had known. And Cyrex, a master of their psionic warfare, was as dangerous as he was relentless. If he reached the black sails, everything they'd worked for could unravel in an instant. "No choice," Rika said, her voice resolute. "We finish this now." She sent the command. Prometheus executed the final phase of their plan. A full system disruption in the Vailari convoy's command vehicle, disabling their shields and causing their backup systems to overload. The convoy was momentarily paralyzed, leaving the Vailari with no way to fight back. But they were still in danger. Cyrex would not be so easily deterred. The black sails fought fiercely, but the psychic pressure from Cyrex was palpable, a suffocating, mind-bending force that made it hard to think, let alone fight. Rika gritted her teeth, pushing past the haze that crept into her thoughts. "Now," Rika shouted, signaling for the final charge. The black sails surged forward, overwhelmed but determined. The balance was tipping, and for the first time, Rika could see it clearly. The Vailari were losing control. They had struck a blow that would echo across the galaxy. The dust from the battlefield hung heavy in the air, a shroud over the wreckage of what had once been a Vailari convoy. Rika stood amidst the debris, her chest rising and falling with the weight of her breaths. The battle had been hard, but it was far from over. They had crippled the convoy, and Cyrex had been forced to retreat. But the Vailari were not a species that easily surrendered. Rika knew they would come back with reinforcements, and next time, they wouldn't make the same mistakes. Her fingers tightened around her weapon as she surveyed the aftermath. The black sails were collecting what they could from the wreckage. Weapons, data drives, any scrap of usable technology. But there was an eerie sense of quiet around them now. The victory had been significant, but it felt like a single drop in a vast ocean. "You did well," Casey said, approaching her. His voice was gruff, but there was a hint of respect behind it. "We've bought ourselves some breathing room, but we both know this isn't over." Rika nodded. She could see the fear in their eyes. In her own, if she was being honest. They had taken down a convoy, but the Vailari weren't going to let this go. And now, with Cyrex in the mix, their battle had moved to a whole new level. "We've got the data," Tessa called out from behind them, holding up a secure drive in one hand. Her expression was tense but determined. "And we got enough intel to make our next move count. But we need to act quickly." Rika took the drive from her, plugging it into her wrist interface. The screen flashed with a cascade of encrypted files, each one a piece of the Vailari's military network. The documents detailed troop movements, fleet positions, and, most importantly, the locations of several Vailari supply depots and research facilities scattered across Earth. "We've struck them hard," Rika said, studying the data. "But we need to hit them where they least expect it. If we can cripple their supply lines and knock out their communications for good, we might be able to force their hand." But as she spoke, a sickening feeling began to creep over her. She had a nagging sense that there was something more to this, something that the Vailari weren't telling them. The deeper she delved into the files, the more unsettling it became. There were no clear indications of Cyrex's full strength, no mention of his true abilities. He wasn't just a military officer. He was a psionic weapon, a force to be reckoned with. "Prometheus," Rika muttered under her breath, activating her comm. "Run a deeper analysis of their command structure. Is there something we're missing?" The AI's voice responded, calm and methodical. "I have found a series of encrypted communications between Cyrex and high-ranking Vailari officials. It seems he is coordinating a counteroffensive. But there's more. The Vailari are aware of your activities. They are mobilizing a fleet from their outer colonies. They plan to strike at Earth itself." Rika's blood ran cold. A fleet? That was something they hadn't anticipated. She had known the Vailari were dangerous, but this was different. A full-scale invasion would crush any hope they had of winning. They would need more than just guerrilla tactics to survive. We've underestimated them, Casey said, as though reading her thoughts. A fleet. They're not just coming for the convoys anymore. They're coming for us. Rika looked at the group, the weight of their responsibility pressing down on her. The time for small victories was over. They couldn't win this war with hit-and-run tactics alone. Earth would need an army. A real army, capable of holding its own against the Velari. And to do that, they'd have to take the war to the Velari, to their home systems, and strike at the very core of their empire. We're going to need more allies, Rika said quietly. We have to unite every resistance faction on Earth. The Black Sails can't do this alone. Tessa and Casey exchanged a look. It was a gamble, but there was no other option. How do we start? Casey asked, his voice low but filled with resolve. Rika's eyes locked on the encrypted files, the paths to victory and destruction intertwining. We reach out to every cell, every resistance group. We unite the fractured remnants of humanity. And then we take the fight to the Velari, once and for all. Her voice was steady, but deep down, she knew this was no longer just a fight for Earth. This was a fight for survival. If they failed, it wouldn't just be their world that fell. It would be every world the Velari touched. And that thought, the weight of it, settled over her like a cloak. They had no choice. The war had only just begun. The weight of their newfound mission pressed heavily on Rika's shoulders. As she sat in the war room, her gaze fixed on the holographic map of Earth and the distant stars beyond, she realized just how much was at stake. The Velari's fleet wasn't just a threat to their home. It was a declaration that the Velari would stop at nothing to break humanity once and for all. There was no turning back now. The room hummed with activity. The Black Sails, and a few other resistance cells they had reached out to over the past few weeks moving in sync. Tessa was already working on securing the communications channels, hacking into various resistance networks to deliver Rika's message. Casey was coordinating ground movements, securing resources for the inevitable battles ahead. Rika took a breath and spoke to the room. We have one shot at this. If we don't unite every resistance faction on Earth, we'll be fighting a war with no hope of victory. We need to gather every weapon, every piece of intelligence, and every soldier we can. Casey turned from the map and looked at her with a rare, determined glint in his eyes. We've got groups from across the globe starting to respond, some with more resources than others. The problem is trust. A lot of these cells haven't heard from each other in years. They don't exactly have faith in our ability to lead a combined front. Rika knew that was true. The remnants of humanity had become fractured, each group scattered in isolation, surviving the best way they could. To unite them, she needed to show them more than just strength. She needed to show them hope, and hope had been in short supply for far too long. Tessa, who had been silent for most of the meeting, spoke up. We've got intel from the resistance in the Pacific archipelagos. They've secured several advanced tech catches from the Velari. We can use them to bolster our military capabilities, but we'll need to move fast. The Velari will undoubtedly be watching these movements. We'll move quietly, Rika said, her voice steely. The last thing we need is to announce our next moves prematurely. Stealth, speed, and precision. That's how we win this. All right, but we're going to need more than just weapons, Casey said, crossing his arms. We'll need ships, fighters, something to counteract the Velari's fleet. Without that, it's just guerrilla tactics with no strategic backup. Rika nodded, her mind already running through the possibilities. The technology, the data they'd seized from the Velari, the knowledge stored in Prometheus archives. It was all coming together. They had a foundation, but there was still a critical piece missing: the resources and manpower to stand up to the Velari's superior forces. Prometheus, Rika called out, activating the eye's hologram in the center of the room. We need a list of viable starship designs and military hardware from the tech catches. Can we reverse engineer any of it to create ships capable of defending Earth? Prometheus's voice filled the room. Analyzing. I have located several older pre-Valari designs. However, they are decades outdated. Their tech could be adapted for guerrilla warfare, but they would not be sufficient for a full-scale space battle against the Valari's advanced fleet. Rika's face hardened. I need you to find a way to upgrade them. We have no other choice. Prometheus paused for a moment. Understood. However, I will require more resources. You will need to secure additional materials and facilities to build and maintain them. Then that's our next move, Rika said, making up her mind. We go to the old shipyards in the Antarctic. I know a group of engineers there who can help us. They've been hiding from the Valari for years, but they still have the skill and knowledge to build what we need. It's risky, but it's our best shot. The room fell silent as the weight of her words hung in the air. They were about to take on a mission that could either make or break their entire plan. If they didn't secure the resources to build their fleet, they would be at a severe disadvantage when the Valari arrived. But Rika knew they had no other option. Casey finally broke the silence. We'll need a solid strategy to get past the Valari surveillance systems. We can't just march in there and expect to walk out unscathed. Tessa nodded. I can work with Prometheus to hack their systems and provide cover for our movements, but it'll be tight. Rika turned to face them, her expression resolute. I know it's a long shot, but we're not backing down. We'll get to those shipyards. We'll build our fleet. And when the Valari come, we'll be ready. The room filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The next phase of their war had begun. And this time, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for Earth's future. Rika turned her gaze to the stars outside the window. She didn't know how long it would take before the Valari's fleet arrived, but she knew one thing for sure. The war was coming. And this time, humanity would not go down without a fight. The journey to the Antarctic shipyards was a dangerous one, and every mile felt like a race against time. The Valari surveillance net was tightening, their sensors more sophisticated than anything Earth had ever faced. Even with Prometheus hacking their systems to throw off their trackers, Rika knew that the closer they got to the shipyards, the greater the risk. They were running out of time. The Black Sails, along with the other scattered resistance groups, had managed to form a rough alliance, but trust was still fragile. With each passing day, Rika could feel the strain of holding it all together. The resistance factions had agreed to rally behind her for the time being, but there were murmurs of doubt among some of the leaders. Their forces were small, and they were no match for the Valari's technological might. The skies above Antarctica were bleak, a swirling vortex of snow and ice, as the team descended toward the icy expanse. The once proud shipyards, now little more than a ghost town hidden beneath layers of frozen waste, were the last bastion of Earth's old military capabilities, a place where engineers and old-world technicians had once worked on the development of starships, before the Valari's arrival turned everything upside down. The transport shuttle landed with a heavy thud on the frozen tarmac, the engines whining as they powered down. Rika's boots crunched against the ice as she stepped out first, her breath visible in the harsh cold. Casey, Tessa, and the rest of the squad followed quickly, weapons drawn in case of an ambush. We've got a small window, Casey said, glancing around the abandoned facility. The towering walls of the shipyard, now buried in snow, were eerily quiet. It seemed as though the place had been forgotten, left to rot. But Rika knew better. The engineers they were meeting had hidden well, surviving off the scraps of old technology and the few resources they could salvage. And now, they were their only hope. Rika tapped her wrist calm, activating the encrypted channel to the engineers. This is Moreau. We've arrived. Status report. A crackling voice came through the speaker, rough with static. Moreau, it's Clark. You made it. Get inside. Quick. We got company. Rika's stomach clenched at the mention of the Valari. The tension was palpable now. No matter how much they tried to stay out of sight, it seemed like the Valari were always one step ahead. On our way, she responded, her voice sharp. The team moved quickly, the wind howling around them as they made their way toward the entrance of the underground facility. The steel doors creaked open with a low groan, revealing the dimly lit interior. Inside, rows of hulking ship frames stood covered in tarps and dust, relics of a time long past. "Welcome to the last hope of humanity," Clark said, stepping forward. The engineer was a grizzled man, his face lined with age and hardship. Despite his weathered appearance, his eyes held a sharp, intelligent gleam. "We've been working on these ships in secret for years. They're old, but they'll fly. We just need time. Time we don't have." Rika took in the sight of the shipyard. The frames were crude compared to the Valeri's sleek designs, but they were functional. They would need extensive modifications, but that was a challenge Rika was ready to face. "We'll get them operational. We don't have a choice. The Valeri fleet is coming, and we're the only ones who can stop them." Casey walked up beside her, his voice low. "I don't like how this feels. Moreau, the Valeri are closing in, and we're in the middle of their territory. We need to move fast." Rika nodded, feeling the same tension gnawing at her. "We'll make it work." "Clark, how many ships can we get ready?" Clark paused for a moment, assessing the situation. "We've got enough material for 4, maybe 5 ships. But they'll be basic, no match for the Valeri's fleet unless we have time to properly modify them. We can install stealth technology and upgrade their engines, but it won't be perfect. We'll be fighting blind. That's all we need," Rika said, her jaw tightening. "We just need enough firepower to push them back long enough for Earth's forces to regroup." "But that's the problem," Clark said, his voice rising with urgency. "There's nothing left of Earth's forces. The Valeri wiped out any organized military presence years ago. This is it. It's all on us now." Rika's heart skipped a beat, the weight of Clark's words sinking in. She had always known that humanity was on the edge, but hearing it so bluntly was a sharp reminder of what was at stake. This wasn't just about taking back Earth anymore. This was about survival. The survival of every human being left, across the entire galaxy. "We'll make it count," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "We'll build what we can, and when the Valeri come, we'll show them what humanity is capable of. This is our home, and we will defend it." Clark gave a slow nod. "Then let's get to work. We don't have much time." As the team dispersed to begin the modifications, Rika stood there for a moment longer, her gaze lifting to the cold, starry sky above. She could feel it now, a sense of impending doom on the horizon, but also a flicker of something else. Hope. This was just the beginning, and humanity would fight until the very end. The days that followed were a blur of relentless effort. Rika barely slept, barely ate. There was only one focus now, the ships. The team worked around the clock, scavenging through old tech and pulling together every resource they could find to upgrade the ancient ship frames. The engineers in the shipyard worked with a desperation Rika hadn't seen before. Every weld, every modification, every patch of armor was a small step toward survival. Each ship was a masterpiece of necessity. They were crude, not designed for space warfare in the way the Valeri's sleek, advanced fleet was, but they were theirs. They were human. And for all their imperfections, they were their best shot at winning this war. Prometheus, ever the silent sentinel, fed them the data needed to tweak the ship's systems. Stealth capabilities were enhanced, shields fortified, and engines pushed to their limits. It wasn't enough to make them a match for the Valeri's fleet in open combat, but it would allow them to strike fast and hard, like a knife in the dark. Rika knew they had only one chance. If the Valeri's fleet arrived before the ships were ready, Earth would fall. If they were too slow in responding to the threat, humanity would be lost. It was a brutal calculus. Time was the most precious commodity, and there was never enough of it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ships were ready. There were 4 of them, small, rugged, and powered by human ingenuity. They had been given names: Vigilance, Defiance, Resolve, and Hope. These ships weren't just made of metal and circuitry. They were the embodiment of humanity's last stand, crafted by every hand that had dared to believe they could make a difference. Rika stood before them, looking out over the ships as they sat on the cold, frozen tarmac. The shipyard was still quiet, but it was no longer a place of despair. It was a forge, a crucible where humanity's spirit had been reawakened. "We're ready," Casey said, his voice grim but resolute. He stood beside her, staring at the ships, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. Rika turned to him, the weight of their situation clear in her eyes. "Are we?" she asked softly. "Can we really stop them?" Casey didn't hesitate. "We're the only ones who can." The comms crackled to life, and Tessa's voice broke through the static. "Rika, we've got movement. Valeri ships detected. They're dropping out of hyperspace. It's them." Rika's heart pounded in her chest. The time had come. The Valeri fleet was here. "Get to the ships," she ordered. "Move out. We need to engage them now, before they bring the full force of their fleet to Earth's doorstep." The days that followed were a blur of relentless effort. Rika barely slept, barely ate. There was only one focus now: the ships. The team worked around the clock, scavenging through old tech and pulling together every resource they could find to upgrade the ancient ship frames. The engineers in the shipyard worked with a desperation Rika hadn't seen before. Every weld, every modification, every patch of armor was a small step toward survival. Each ship was a masterpiece of necessity. They were crude, not designed for space warfare in the way the Valeri's sleek, advanced fleet was. But they were theirs. They were human. And for all their imperfections, they were their best shot at winning this war. Prometheus, ever the silent sentinel, fed them the data needed to tweak the ship's systems. Stealth capabilities were enhanced, shields fortified, and engines pushed to their limits. It wasn't enough to make them a match for the Valeri's fleet in open combat, but it would allow them to strike fast and hard, like a knife in the dark. Rika knew they had only one chance. If the Valeri's fleet arrived before the ships were ready, Earth would fall. If they were too slow in responding to the threat, humanity would be lost. It was a brutal calculus. Time was the most precious commodity, and there was never enough of it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ships were ready. There were 4 of them, small, rugged, and powered by human ingenuity. They had been given names: Vigilance, Defiance, Resolve, and Hope. These ships weren't just made of metal and circuitry. They were the embodiment of humanity's last stand, crafted by every hand that had dared to believe they could make a difference. Rika stood before them, looking out over the ships as they sat on the cold, frozen tarmac. The shipyard was still quiet, but it was no longer a place of despair. It was a forge, a crucible where humanity's spirit had been reawakened. "We're ready," Casey said, his voice grim but resolute. He stood beside her, staring at the ships, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. Rika turned to him, the weight of their situation clear in her eyes. "Are we?" she asked softly. "Can we really stop them?" Casey didn't hesitate. "We're the only ones who can." The comms crackled to life, and Tessa's voice broke through the static. "Rika, we've got movement. Valeri ships detected. They're dropping out of hyperspace. It's them." Rika's heart pounded in her chest. The time had come. The Valeri fleet was here. "Get to the ships," she ordered. "Move out. We need to engage them now, before they bring the full force of their fleet to Earth's doorstep." They all rushed to the ships, climbing into their cockpits, hearts pounding in unison. The controls were clunky and unfamiliar, but Rika's hands were steady. She had trained for this. They all had. And now they had to put everything they had learned into action. The ships lifted off, cutting through the thick atmosphere of the frozen continent. Above them, the sky was a churning mass of blackness, dotted with the cold pinpricks of distant stars. Ahead, the Valeri fleet loomed, Massive warships, their sleek silhouettes ominous against the backdrop of space. They were everything the Black Sails ships were not: organized, advanced, and terrifyingly powerful. "We've got one shot," Rika muttered, voice tight. "Let's make it count." Prometheus's voice cut in. "I have mapped the Valeri fleet's formation. I'm preparing an attack vector for the ships. It will be difficult, but not impossible." The first salvo came before they were even in range, a powerful burst of plasma fire streaking past their ships. The Valeri had detected them, and they weren't holding back. Rika's grip tightened on the controls. The Vigilance lurched forward, narrowly dodging the plasma. "Stay sharp," she shouted over the comms. "We need to disrupt their formation. If we can separate their ships, we'll have a chance." Casey's voice came through, calm despite the chaos. "Defiance moving into position. We'll hit their flanks. Get ready." Tessa's voice followed, a note of urgency in it. "I'm hacking into their systems now. I can mess with their targeting arrays, but it'll take a minute. Keep them distracted." The Black Sails ships were swift, darting in and out of the Valeri's fire as they weaved through the enemy fleet. It was chaotic, a dance of destruction, but they had one advantage: their unpredictability. "Targets locked," Rika said as her ship's cannons came online. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. The ship jolted as she fired, sending a blast of energy toward one of the Valeri warships. It struck, sending sparks flying from the enemy shields, but the damage was minimal. The Valeri retaliated almost instantly, their weapons punishing the human ships for every small victory.